The fireworks are already exploding, masking the sound of Nina dragging a 180-pound man across the asphalt. His blood is thawing the ice under her boots, leaving a streak she doesn't have time to cover. He isn't unconscious, he's gripping her wrist hard enough to bruise, whispering a threat in a language she doesn't speak. She kicks the back door of her apartment building open just as a black SUV screeches to a halt at the mouth of the alley. She slams the deadbolt home, leaning against the door, feeling the vibration of heavy footsteps on the other side. The footsteps pause, then fade, but the danger shifts from outside to inside. Nina drops Jae-hwa onto her kitchen rug. He immediately tries to pull a gun from his jacket, but it snags on the lining. She sees the intricate tattoos climbing his neck. This isn't a drunk patron, this is organized crime. She realizes she hasn't saved the victim, she has invited a wolf into her sheep pen. He passes out, the gun clattering to the floor. Nina stands over him, phone in hand, realizing that dialing 911 will bring the men in the SUV back to finish the job, and her along with him. The blood didn't pool, it soaked. It drank the fibers of the beige rug Nina had bought on sale 3 years ago, turning the cheap weave into a heavy, crimson sponge. The man, Jae-hwa, groaned, a wet, rattling sound that cut through the muffled boom of fireworks detonating over the city. Nina scrambled back, her heels slipping on the hardwood. She was trembling, not from the cold that clung to her coat, but from the realization of what was lying in her kitchenette. He was expensive. The suit was ruined, but the fabric was Italian silk. The shoes were leather. The gun that had slid across the floor was matte black and devoid of serial numbers. She knelt beside him, checking the wound. A jagged tear just above his hip. It was pumping, dark and rhythmic. She pressed a dish towel against it, but the cloth saturated in seconds. He needed a hospital. No, he wheezed, his eyes squeezed shut, teeth gritted in a rictus of pain. His hand clamped over hers, his grip shockingly strong for a dying man. No cops. If he died here, she went to prison. If she called the cops, the men in the SUV might come back for both of them. She looked at the refrigerator. Under a magnet shaped like a slice of pizza sat a white envelope. Rent. $750 in small bills, scraped together from double shifts and stolen tips. It was due tomorrow. Nina ripped her hand away from his side, leaving him gasping, and snatched the envelope. She grabbed her keys and ran. The bodega on the corner was bright, smelling of stale coffee and pine sol. The clerk, an older man named Sal, was watching the ball drop on a tiny television. He smiled when the bell chimed. Happy New Year, Nina. You celebrating? Something like that, she muttered, slapping a $20 bill on the counter. She didn't make eye contact. She slammed the items down, a bottle of the cheapest vodka, a 3-pack of superglue, and a roll of heavy-duty shop towels. Sal paused, looking at the items, then at the blood smear on her cuff. Art project, she said, her voice brittle. Keep the change. She ran back, the plastic bag slapping against her leg. Inside the apartment, the silence was worse than the noise. He hadn't moved. He looked grayer, like ash in the snow. Nina kicked the door shut and locked all 3 deadbolts. She tore the vodka open with her teeth and poured it directly into the wound. Jae-hwa's back arched off the floor, a guttural scream tearing from his throat. Nina shoved the towel into his mouth to stifle the noise, pinning his shoulders down with her knees. The smell of alcohol and copper filled the small room, dizzying and metallic. Stay still, she hissed, tears of panic pricking her eyes. Don't you die on me. You don't get to die. She pinched the edges of the torn skin together, her fingers slick and slipping. She applied the glue. It burned her own skin, fusing her latex-free gloves to his flesh before she ripped them away. She worked until the bleeding slowed to a sip, until the shop towels were a mound of red gore in the corner. She sat back on her heels, exhausted. The envelope on the counter was empty. The rug was ruined. Her hands were covered in the blood of a man she didn't know, a man who was currently unconscious in her kitchen. She looked at the gun on the floor, then at her stained hands. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was an accessory. Nina scrubbed at the hardwood with a sponge soaked in bleach, the fumes stinging her eyes. The blood had turned tacky, resisting her efforts, a stubborn reminder of the felony currently passed out on her couch. It was 3 a.m. The fireworks had stopped, replaced by the heavy, oppressive silence of the city in winter. She reached for the bucket to rinse the sponge when the air in the room changed. There was no sound of movement, no rustle of fabric. Just a sudden displacement of air. Before Nina could turn, a hand clamped around her throat, slamming her backward. Her head cracked against the refrigerator door. A ceramic magnet shaped like a slice of pizza clattered to the floor, breaking in half. Jae-hwa was pressing his forearm against her windpipe, his face inches from hers. He was sweating, his skin gray and clammy, pupil blown wide with adrenaline and pain. He held a paring knife from her dish rack in his other hand, the blade trembling just beneath her left eye. "Who sent you?" he rasped. His voice was a jagged ruin. "Tell me." Nina couldn't breathe. She clawed at his arm, but it was like striking iron. Fresh blood began to bloom through the white shirt she had cut open and taped back together. She stopped struggling. She went limp. The sudden lack of resistance confused him. He loosened his grip just enough for air to rush back into her lungs. Nina coughed, wet and harsh. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She looked down at his side, where the superglue was straining against his movement, then looked him dead in the eye. "You're reopening the wound I just spent my rent money to close," she said. Her voice was flat, scraping the bottom of her exhaustion. "And you're getting blood on my clean floor." Jae-hwa blinked. The knife didn't lower, but the manic intensity in his eyes flickered. He was expecting fear. He was met with the irritation of a woman who had worked a double shift and just wanted to go to sleep. "Where am I?" he demanded, though the edge was dulling. "My kitchen. You were dying in the alley. I dragged you in." Nina reached into her apron pocket. Jae-hwa flinched, pressing the knife tip against her cheek. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled out a crumpled pack of menthols and a lighter. She shook one out and held it up to his lips. "Smoke it or kill me," she said. "But if you bleed out afterwards, I'm not cleaning it up." Jae-hwa stared at the cigarette. Then he looked at the blood soaking his side. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him swaying on his feet. The predator was still there, but the tank was empty. He lowered the knife. He took the cigarette between his lips, leaning forward as she flicked the lighter. The flame illuminated the sharp angles of his face, the sweat dripping from his temple. He took a long drag, exhaling a cloud of smoke that mingled with the bleach fumes. He didn't say thank you. He slid down the front of the refrigerator until he hit the floor, eyes fixed on the door, the knife still loosely gripped in his hand. He wasn't leaving. The vibration was relentless. It rattled against the linoleum, a buzzing drill sound that seemed to shake the walls of the tiny apartment. Jae-hwa sat propped against the cabinets, his face a mask of sweat and grey exhaustion. He stared at the device lying in the puddle of bloody water Nina hadn't finished mopping up. The screen lit up the dark room with a harsh blue glow. Director Kong. The name flashed, disappeared, and flashed again. "Answer it," Nina whispered, standing by the sink, holding the bleach bottle like a weapon. "Make it stop. If I answer, Jae-hwa murmured, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. They pin the tower. They triangulate. They find the door. If you don't answer, they keep calling. No. He looked at the phone with a strange mixture of longing and hatred. If I don't answer, they assume the job is finished. They assume I am a corpse in the snow. The phone stopped. Silence rushed back in, heavy and suffocating. Then it started again. A different name this time. Lieutenant Min. Jae-hwa's hand twitched toward it. It was his lifeline. It was the only tether to the empire he had built, the orders he needed to give, the men he needed to command. To let it ring was to abdicate the throne. To let it ring was to admit he had been defeated. He looked up at Nina. She was hugging her arms to her chest, shivering. She wasn't looking at him, she was looking at the window, expecting glass to shatter, expecting a laser sight to sweep across the curtains. He had dragged the civilian into a war zone. If they traced the phone, they wouldn't just kill him. They would scrub this apartment clean of all biological matter. Jae-hwa gritted his teeth, grabbed the phone, and placed it on the floor face down. He raised the heel of his heavy boot. Wait, Nina started. He brought his heel down. The crunch was sickeningly loud, like bone snapping. Glass and plastic shattered, skittering across the floor. He stomped again, and again, grinding the electronics into a paste of metal and silicon until the blue light flickered and died. He slumped back against the cabinets, breathing hard. The exertion had torn something inside him, fresh blood bloomed on the bandage Nina had applied. You just cut the line, Nina said, staring at the debris. I just died, Jae-hwa corrected, closing his eyes. As of this second, the seat is empty. The truce is over. They will start carving up the city by sunrise to see who takes my place. He looked at her, his eyes dark and hollow. Nobody looks for a dead man, he said. But they will burn the city down to find his ghost. The shouting started at 4:15 a.m. It wasn't a moan of pain anymore, it was a full-throated command shouted at an invisible enemy. Jinsu! Put the knife down. Jinsu! Jae-hwa thrashed on the floor, his limbs flailing with the terrified strength of a fever dream. His skin was radiating heat like a furnace, sweat soaking through the makeshift bandages. Nina froze. The walls in this building were paper-thin. Mrs. Gable next door called the super if Nina's TV volume went above 15. Screaming about knives would bring the police in under 10 minutes. Shut up, Nina hissed, dropping to her knees and clamping a hand over his mouth. He beat her. Nina yelped, snatching her hand back. Jae-hwa scrambled backward, his eyes wide and unseeing, fixed on the ceiling. He was speaking Korean now, rapid-fire and desperate, kicking his heels against the cabinets. She had to cool him down. Now. She grabbed him by the lapels of his ruined suit jacket and hauled him up. He was dead weight, stumbling and fighting her, swinging blindly at Ghost. She kicked the bathroom door open and shoved him toward the porcelain tub. He fell in heavily, his head cracking against the tile wall. He didn't seem to feel it. He tried to rise, shouting a name that sounded like a plea. Nina turned the cold water tap on full blast. The shower head sputtered, then unleashed a freezing spray directly into his face. Jae-hwa gasped, shock cutting through the delirium. He flailed, slipping on the porcelain. Nina didn't wait. She climbed into the tub, fully clothed, straddling his hips to pin him down. She pressed her hands against his chest, shoving him back under the spray. It's just water, she yelled over the roar of the shower. Breathe. He fought her, his hands gripping her forearms, digging his nails in. The water soaked them both instantly, plastering Nina's uniform to her skin and turning Jae-hwa's white shirt translucent. Then, she saw it. The water made the fabric cling like a second skin, revealing the terrain beneath. It wasn't just the fresh bullet wound. His chest and stomach were a tapestry of raised, keloid scars. Cigarette burns in perfect geometric patterns. Long, jagged lines from a whip or a wire. Brands. These weren't battle wounds from a street fight. This was torture. Systematic, ceremonial torture. Nina stopped struggling. She stared at the map of violence written on his body. He hadn't just risen to power, he had been carved into it. Jae-hwa stopped fighting. The cold water finally pierced the fever haze. His eyes cleared, focusing on Nina's face, droplets dripping from her lashes onto his cheeks. He lay still, shivering violently, his hands sliding from her arms to rest weakly on her waist. The shouting stopped. The only sound was the aggressive hiss of the cold shower and their ragged breathing. He looked up at her, not with the arrogance of a boss or the rage of a killer, but with the terrifying vulnerability of a child who had just woken up from a nightmare. They didn't stop, he whispered, the English broken and soft. They never stop. Nina reached out and turned the water off. The silence that followed was heavy, wet, and far too intimate. She was straddling a monster, but she had just seen the stitches that held him together. The fist on the door didn't sound like wood hitting wood, it sounded like authority demanding entry. Nina. I know you're in there. I heard the water running. Nina froze. She was still dripping wet, her uniform heavy and cold against her skin. In the tub, Jae-hwa's eyes snapped open, clarity returning instantly. He reached for the waistband of his trousers, searching for a gun that wasn't there. Stay down, Nina whispered, scrambling out of the bathroom. She grabbed a towel, frantically drying her face and hair as she slid across the hallway in her socks. Nina. Rent was due at midnight. Don't make me get the master key. Panic spiked in her chest. If Mr. Henderson used the key, the chain would stop him, but he'd see the blood smear she'd missed near the fridge. He'd smell the metallic turn of violence under the bleach. She threw the towel into the bedroom and undid the top lock, leaving the chain engaged. She cracked the door 2 inches. Mr. Henderson's face appeared in the gap, red-cheeked and impatient. The smell of stale hallway smoke wafted in. He looked her up and down, his eyes narrowing as he took in her damp, disheveled appearance. You look like hell, he grunted. Where's my money? I can't open the door, Mr. Henderson, Nina said, pitching her voice to a hoarse whisper. She leaned against the frame, blocking his view of the kitchen. It's the flu. The new strain. I caught it at work, and now, my boyfriend has it. Henderson frowned, trying to peer past her shoulder. Boyfriend? Since when do you have a boyfriend? You live alone. He came over for New Year's, she lied, the fabrication tasting like ash. He's got a fever of 104. He's been screaming all night. I've been trying to get his temperature down in the ice bath. That's why I'm wet. As if on cue, a low, pain groan drifted from the bathroom. Nina's heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't told Jae-hwa to make a sound. He was playing along. Henderson recoiled slightly, pulling his face back from the gap. Screaming. I thought that was the TV. Look, I don't care if you're running a hospital in there. I need the 750. I have it, Nina lied again. But I can't give it to you now. Everything is contaminated. I need to sanitize the cash. Please. Just give me 24 hours. Henderson studied her. He looked at the water dripping from her hair onto the floor. He sniffed the air, catching the overwhelming scent of bleach. He didn't look convinced, He looked like a man weighing the hassle of an eviction against the risk of getting sick. One day, he spat, pointing a thick finger at her nose. "If I don't have it by noon tomorrow, I'm not coming back. I'm calling the cops for a wellness check. They can break the door down and drag your sick boyfriend out." He turned and stomped down the hall. Nina closed the door and leaned her forehead against the wood, her knees shaking. A wellness check. Police. She turned back to the room. Jae-hwa was standing in the bathroom doorway, holding the door frame for support. He was pale, shivering, and looking at her with a grim realization. "He knows you're lying," Jae-hwa said softly. He smelled the blood. Jae-hwa sat at the small kitchen table, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket, staring at Nina with the intensity of a sniper waiting for a target to break cover. The fever had burned off enough to leave him sharp, cold, and lethal. "You lied to the landlord," he said, his voice steady. "You lie well." "I did what I had to do," Nina muttered, reheating a cup of coffee in the microwave. She could feel his eyes tracking her every movement. "Why?" Nina turned. "Why what? Why bring me here? Why spend your rent money on glue? Why fight a landlord to keep me hidden?" He leaned forward, wincing slightly. "In my world, nobody does anything for free. And nobody takes a risk without a payout. Who are you waiting for? The Vipers? The police?" "I told you," Nina said, gripping the mug. "I couldn't call the cops." "Bullshit," Jae-hwa spat. "A civilian sees a bleeding man, they call an ambulance. They want to be a hero. Unless they are paid to let him bleed out." He slammed his hand on the table. "Who pays you?" Nina set the mug down hard enough to crack the ceramic. She walked over to the table and leaned down, bringing her face level with his. "You want to know why I didn't call the cops?" she whispered. "Because if they come in here, they run my ID. And if they run my ID, they see the warrant." Jae-hwa paused, his eyes narrowing. "Warrant? Aggravated assault. 4 years ago. I missed a court date because I was working. I'm not a good Samaritan, and I'm not an assassin," Nina said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I'm a felon with a ghost job. If the police walk through that door to save you, they take me out in cuffs. I didn't save you because I care about you. I saved you because a dead body in my alley brings a homicide investigation, and a homicide investigation ends my life." She pulled back, crossing her arms. "I helped you to save myself. Is that selfish enough for you to believe?" Jae-hwa held her gaze for a long time. He studied the tension in her jaw, the fear behind the anger. Slowly, the tension in his shoulders dropped. He understood self-preservation. It was a language he spoke fluently. Altruism was a trap, leverage was security. "So," he said quietly, a dark amusement curling the corner of his mouth. "You are not an angel. You are a fugitive." "We are both fugitives," Nina corrected. "Yes," Jae-hwa agreed. He looked at the window, where the morning light was beginning to bleed through the blinds. "But now I know your secret. If you try to run, I give you to the police. If you try to sell me out, I tell them you did it. And if you try to kill me," Nina shot back, "you bleed out on the floor before you can figure out how to open the 3 locks on my door." Jae-hwa nodded slowly. It wasn't a gesture of friendship. It was the ratification of a contract. "Good," he said. "Now we can walk." "Silence is death," Jae-hwa said, his voice raspy but firm. "If I stay quiet another hour, the lieutenants divide the territory. By tonight, my men will pledge loyalty to the Vipers just to survive." He grabbed a napkin and a pen, his hand shaking as he sketched a crude map. 3 blocks east. Outside the laundromat on 4th. There is a payphone. It must be a landline. Nina took the napkin, looking at the jagged lines. Who uses payphones anymore? People who don't want to be triangulated by a satellite, he snapped. He gripped her wrist, his fingers cold. You call the number. You say exactly this, the table is ready for 6. Then you hang up. You do not wait for a response. You do not speak again. That's it. That is the signal. If Min is loyal, he will know the protocol. He will trace the origin of the call to that specific booth, and he will send the extraction team to the perimeter. If he is not loyal, well, then nobody comes. Nina pulled her coat tight, hiding the bloodstain on her uniform collar. And if the vipers are listening? Then run, Jae-hwa said. The city air was biting, sharp with the smell of exhaust and impending snow. The streets were grey and slushy, filled with the post-holiday hangover of a city getting back to work. Nina kept her head down, moving fast. She used to feel invisible on these streets, just another service worker in a sea of coats. Now, the open space felt like exposure. She found the phone. The metal housing was dented, covered in graffiti tags. She checked over her shoulder. A few pedestrians, a delivery truck, a black sedan idling at the red light. Normal. She lifted the receiver. It was sticky. She dropped the coins in and dialed. The line clicked open. Silence on the other end. The table is ready for 6, Nina said, her voice sounding small against the traffic noise. She slammed the receiver down immediately. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. It was done. The beacon was lit. She turned to leave, pulling her scarf up to cover her nose. Across the street, the light turned green. The black sedan didn't move. Nina froze. The passenger window buzzed down 3 inches. Inside, a man with a shaved head and a distinct scar running through his eyebrow was staring directly at her. He wasn't looking at the laundromat, he was looking at her hand, the one that had just touched the phone. He lifted a radio to his mouth, his eyes never leaving hers. Nina didn't wait. She pivoted on her heel and ducked into the alleyway next to the laundromat, her breath hitching in a panic. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had been seen. Nina didn't take the elevator. She took the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, lungs burning, expecting a hand to grab her ankle at every landing. She crashed through her apartment door, slamming it shut and throwing the deadbolt, the chain, and the floor latch in rapid succession. They saw me, she gasped, sliding down against the wood. The black sedan. The scar. He saw me make the call. Jae-hwa was still at the table, but the map was gone. He had been cleaning his gun, stripped down, wiped with a rag, reassembled. He looked up, his face devoid of the earlier feverish haze. The eyes were clear, dark, and flat. Did he follow? I don't know. I ran through the alley. I cut through the basement. Jae-hwa held up a hand. Quiet. He stood up. It was a slow, agonizing process. Nina watched the fresh blood seep through the white shirt as the movement tore at the glued wound. He didn't make a sound. He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, forcing his body to lock into a vertical position. He wasn't a patient anymore, he was a soldier operating on broken machinery. He limped to the window, peering through the slat of the blinds. Black sedan, he murmured. 2 men in the front. 1 in the back. They are waiting for the breach team. He turned to Nina. They tracked you. They know the building. They are just checking exits before they come up. We have to call the police, Nina said, her voice rising in panic. If they're outside. If you call the police, my men and the Vipers both open fire. You die in the crossfire. Jae-hwa racked the slide of his pistol. He checked the chamber. We hold the room. He walked over to the kitchen drawer, the one with the loose handle, and pulled out the largest knife Nina owned. A 10-inch chef's knife she used for chopping vegetables. He tested the edge with his thumb, drawing a thin line of red. He walked over to her. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't apologize. He held the knife out, handle first. Take it. Nina stared at the blade. I can't use that. You don't have a choice, Jae-hwa said, his voice cold and hard. He grabbed her hand and forced her fingers around the handle. They are not coming to arrest us. They are coming to erase us. If a man comes through that door and he is not me, you put this in his neck. Do you understand? Nina looked at the knife in her hand. It felt heavy, foreign, and sickeningly real. The domestic space of her apartment, the magnets, the rug, the smell of coffee, had evaporated. It was a bunker now. Do you understand? He repeated, louder. Nina tightened her grip until her hand shook. She looked up at him and nodded. Good, Jae-hwa said, turning back to the door, raising his gun. Because they are in the hallway. The doorknob didn't turn. The heavy boots in the hallway stopped moving. Why aren't they breaching? Nina whispered, the knife slick in her sweating palm. Because they don't need to come in, Jae-hwa said, his eyes widening as he realized the tactical shift. Get down. He tackled her. The living room window exploded inward. Not a bullet, but a heavy glass bottle wrapped in a burning rag. It smashed against the far wall, showering the room with liquid fire. The ignition was instantaneous. The vodka-soaked rug, the cheap curtains, the pile of unpaid bills on the counter, everything caught. The heat was a physical blow, sucking the oxygen out of the tiny space in a single, terrifying gasp. Move! Jae-hwa roared, dragging her up. The fire blocked the front door. The hallway was gone. The window, he shouted, coughing as black smoke roiled across the ceiling. The fire escape. Nina scrambled over the broken glass, shielding her face from the searing heat. She threw the sash up, the freezing winter air rushing in to feed the flames behind them. She climbed out onto the rusted metal grate, her hands shaking so badly she almost slipped. She reached back for him. Jae-hwa was struggling. The exertion of the tackle had torn his side completely open, blood was soaking his trousers. He hauled himself over the sill, collapsing onto the metal grate just as the windows blew out from the pressure, sending a tongue of fire leaking into the night. They scrambled down the rattling metal stairs, the iron freezing against their palms, the heat radiating from the building above. They hit the alley floor, the same alley where she had found him 24 hours ago. They stumbled back into the shadows of the neighboring building, gasping for air, lungs burning with soot. Nina looked up. Her apartment was an inferno. She watched the fire devour the only sanctuary she had. Her uniform, her photos, her hidden cash, her identity, it was all turning to ash and drifting down like grey snow. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The Vipers would be gone, fading into the city, leaving the police to find the bodies. You don't exist anymore, Jae-hwa rasped, clutching his side, leaning heavily against the brick wall. He looked at her, his face smeared with soot and blood. Nina the waitress died in that fire. Nina gripped the handle of the chef's knife, still clutched in her hand. She looked at the burning window, then at the darkness of the city stretching out before them. He was right. There was no going back. There was no job to show up for. There was no bed to sleep in. She turned to the mafia boss she had saved. Then let's go, she said. Sometimes the only way out is to let the old life burn. I'll see you in part 2.